Park here. I bet you're cranking out more content now than ever, and it's important that it converts customers. But chances are, unless you are intentionally telling stories, you're probably not being heard. So, I'm excited to announce our first public Business of Story Masterclass and Deliberate Practice program starting Thursday, June 6, 2019, right here in Phoenix, Arizona. In our half-day hands-on session that kicks off the program, you'll learn the applied science and bewitchery of storytelling and how to hack the core consciousness of your audiences. During the following 7 weeks, we're going to use the Thinkific online platform to deliver you a storytelling assignment every week on Monday that you will apply immediately in your brand or business. We'll share with you the frameworks that are proven to help you clarify your story, amplify your impact, and simplify your life. We'll even have a private Facebook group so you can learn from and grow with your fellow Business of Story students. So if you'd like to captivate your audiences and elevate yourself, your business, and your people, visit businessofstory.com right now and reserve your seat. We only have a limited number of spots available in this very select cohort of storytellers. So pause this episode and save your place right now. Oh, and don't forget to come back because we have a marvelous show for you today.
I thought it was just a stupid picture of a pig in the ocean. But after hearing that story, I had to have it. Now I wasn't just buying a picture. I was buying a story. Story literally made the picture worth more money to me.
That's what businesses are about. People buy brands. People buy stories much more than anything else.
I work with a lot of big enterprise companies, but let's just say I always tell folks, drop the PowerPoint, close your laptops, start with your story.
If you want people to get engaged and you want people to act, you have to tell them an emotionally powerful story. That's with great characters, it's with uncertain outcomes, and it's with high stakes and drama.
All business strategy is a story.
Have I got an immersive show for you today? A really interesting development came along here at the Business of Story about a month ago. Chip Scutari, Dave C. Slack, they have a PR firm here in town, and they do a lot of work and have done a lot of work over the years with Taser International. I think you all are aware of Taser. They've been around a long time. They've been in and out of the news, and they've been out there protecting our public safety officers for many, many years. The brand has moved into more of a technology brand now and is called Axon. And what's interesting about this is today we have with us the president of Axon, who has been with the Taser company and now Axon since, 2008. And not only is that going to be an interesting conversation to talk a little bit about those two brands, but what he has brought to the market, and this is the market of literature. He has written and has recently published the world's first immersive textbook. And it's kind of interesting coming from the background of Taser and that sort of technology of how he is opening up the world of science and in particular opening up and encouraging girls and women to pursue their dreams in science. And it all comes together on today's show. And I would like to welcome to the studio L.S. Larson. Welcome.
Park, well, thank you for having me on the show. Really excited to talk, but also want to give you just a little background on the inception of iGist. So, as you said, my day job is running a public company called Axon. We're most well known for the Taser device. You know, this Taser device is used by pretty much every law enforcement agency in the United States. And I've been with the company just over 11 years. And as I went through the ranks, I've been president for about 5 years now. I really was fascinated by the history of the company. And so I looked into it and I discovered that the Taser device was actually named by a former NASA scientist, the inventor of the Taser, a guy named Jack Kovar. And in the wake of the Kent State shootings, the President of the United States put out a Blue Ribbon Commission, a call to the scientific community to create less lethal weapons that could be used to de-escalate force so we wouldn't have to use lethal weapons. And so in the wake of that...
And that all started out of Kent State?
Yeah, the Kent State
I did not
shooting.
realize it went back that far.
So this former NASA scientist, Jack Kovar, who actually worked on the Apollo program, which is pretty cool. We're coming up on the 50-year anniversary of the first moon landing. He said, well, couldn't we use electricity to incapacitate people? And so he invented the Taser, and he named it after his favorite childhood series, the Tom Swift series, in particular one book called Thomas Swift and His Electric Rifle. So Jack was a great inventor. He wasn't the best business guy. And the Taser kind of floundered for about 20 years until the current CEO and founder of the company Taser, a guy named Rick Smith, had two of his friends killed in a road rage incident here in Scottsdale. And so he was looking for ways to create less lethal technologies as well. He found Jack in a garage in Tucson. Jack was in his 70s. Rick was in his 20s. And they founded the company Taser. I joined the company about 10 years ago while I was in business school at Thunderbird Graduate School of Business, International Business School. And I actually started inside the company working on a small division called Axon that was focused on wearable cameras. And so over the last 10 years, we've built Axon into the market leader with wearable cameras and digital evidence management software. 2 years ago, we changed the name of the company from Taser to Axon to reflect that big investment that we're making in wearable cameras as well as software as a service. So anyway, let's go back to the history of the company with Tom Swift. I looked into that and I thought, man, that's a cool story. This guy was inspired by this childhood series where in the Tom Swift series, the plot is pretty much the same in every story. This boy is up against a world-ending existential threat, and using an invention, he saves the day. And the Tom Swift series not only inspired Jack Kovar, the inventor of Taser, it also inspired Steve Wozniak, the technical co-founder of Apple, as well as Ray Kurzweil, who's a leading technologist at Google and really the forefather of this concept called the singularity. Are you familiar with it?
Oh, yeah. AI and the singularity. For our listeners, that is when AI finally takes over and becomes all-consuming and erases humanity and Homo sapiens as we know it from the face of the earth.
That's right. And not
to
only
be too doom and gloom, and I'm not sure if the taser's going to work on the computers when that happens.
Yeah. So not only these three inventors, but literally hundreds of scientists and inventors attributed their kind of spark for imagination and inspiration to this, childhood series. And it was actually back in like the early 1900s, 1910, 1920 timeframe. Well, it hasn't aged real well. Times have changed in terms of societal norms and whatnot. And so as I've had children of my own, I have 3 daughters. And to be honest, it's pretty disheartening just how there's such a lack of optimism in today. If you turned on the news, you would just think, the world was the most awful place in the world. But I actually think we're living in the most exciting time in history. 50 years ago, we put a person on the moon. And when you hear these, if you've watched First Man or read the book, and you hear these scientists talk about what it was like to work on those programs, it was a time of inspiration and hope. And I think we're in a new era of that with aiming, to put people on Mars and a whole new age of discovery. And so I thought, wouldn't it be cool if we could kind of reboot a childhood series that would ignite, kids to build the future that they want to live in?
That is awesome. I remember when Neil Armstrong stepped on the face of the moon. I grew up in Seattle. You grew up in Forks, Washington. We'll get to that in a minute. But I was a little kid, and my brother Tom and I scrambled upstairs. It was a Sunday morning. We got up about 6:30 in the morning, as I remember. We got our Pop-Tarts, sat down in front of our TV set, color TV, but the old tube. And we watched it live coming from the moon, and it just absolutely blew us away. And I didn't know it at the time, but when you look back at that, it's the scientists that put Neil Armstrong on the moon were mostly 20-somethings, early 30s. There weren't very many old folks in that room. It was the youth that really put us up on the moon. So where you are today, you're saying now we can have that, continue to have that same kind of impact, and we don't have to wait on the older generation to do that. We can do that now with people coming up through school and those in Silicon Valley and the 20, 30 something.
Yeah. So, when we talk about the power of story and the power of inspiration, I think it's really powerful to have a really compelling mission and vision. And I've been very fortunate at Axon. Our mission is to obsolete the bullet, and it is a very audacious goal.
To obsolete the bullet. It just doesn't matter anymore because you're able to capture it, how do you do that?
We believe that we're going to create a device that's so good, that's so effective, that you wouldn't want to use a lethal device. Just like people are now choosing to use electric vehicles over, gas vehicles, to think in 500 years we'll still be slinging lead bullets at each other is just a pretty archaic concept if you think about it. And if you were to tell somebody, hey, we're going to take your sword away 500 years ago, they would have said, no way. And that's kind of what we believe. We believe we're on this super technology curve where technology can push humanity forward. And that's kind of what I'd like to do with iGest. Our mission is to inspire the future. That's what we want to do at iGest. We want to unlock the imagination of all these kids today.
And when you're talking about iGest, we haven't officially announced the name of the book. That is the name of the book. What iGest stands for?
iGest stands for Intergalactic Institute of Science and Technology, and it's a really fun story. In the not so distant future,
before we get that, but it's not a book that you wrote to advance your brand. It's a book that you wrote as a personal mission, a personal passion.
That's right. I really wrote this for my daughters and really everyone to say, hey, you can create the future that you want to live in. And it's through a fiction format that's supposed to be fun and playful. And so far, it's gotten really positive response.
Yeah, I picked up the book, so I've got that. You got augmented reality in it that I could, open it up and it comes to life. But you did something really interesting with the app, where I can read the book on the app, and you level up, and you can put your own hologram in there and do all kinds of cool stuff.
Yeah, there's just so much cool stuff that you can do on a smartphone. And as I observed my daughters interacting with their iPads and different devices, I thought, wouldn't it be cool if we could create an immersive reading experience? And the current e-readers are great for me as a business guy. If I want to fly to DC or New York, I can have 1,000 books on my phone, but they haven't really kind of innovated in terms of creating what I think could be a really engaging experience. And so as a technologist, I thought, wouldn't it be cool if we could incorporate some of the features that I saw my daughters love in apps like TikTok and Snapchat and Fortnite, and say, how could we envision a reading experience that would be really, really immersive? So we built this beautiful app experience that just pulls you into the story with stunning sci-fi photorealistic illustrations. We also have these really fun cinematic animations. And if you've ever used Apple's iMessage effects, where you can send somebody a birthday cake and like balloons come up, as you read the iGest story, these animations pop up during the most impactful parts of the scenes, and it's a really fun, playful experience.
And that's where you define it as the world's first immersive book.
That's right.
Yeah.
We also have, when you finish chapter, you get coins and badges with a reward system. And with those, you can buy characters and put yourself in photos with the characters from the book. You also can buy these things called character cards, which when I was a kid, we had baseball cards.
Bubblegum cards.
Ken Griffey Jr. baseball card was a hot item up in the Seattle area. And I don't even know if kids have baseball cards these days. But I thought, wouldn't it be cool if we had these virtual character cards where you could see some of the concept art that was used to bring these characters to life and also read a little bit more about them. So there's a ton of cool features in the app. I actually have a really good friend here in town, a gentleman named Mark Donnelly, who he and his wife are one of the key authors on the Chicken Soup for the Soul series.
Sure, I've met Mark. Yeah.
And Mark's a hiking buddy of mine. He's also a great mentor and friend. And as I was explaining to Mark the concept of iGist, I originally just wanted to do an app. I thought, who's going to read a hard copy of a book in 20 years and 10 years? And Mark really pushed me, as well as a couple others, to say, people are going to want a hard copy of the book. So again, as a technologist, I thought, well, how could we make that fun and exciting? And in our app, we have an augmented reality viewer that if you combine it with the hard copy of the book, it brings the animations in the book to life, which is just a really, really cool experience.
Okay, so you are doing a ton of stuff, and you're a young guy. So you've accomplished a lot in a short amount of time. Let's go back to your backstory a little bit. You grew up in Forks, Washington State, which is out on the peninsula, and it's by the rainforest. You're next to the rainforest. You get probably more rain than anywhere else in the continental United States of America, I'm guessing. And it's a logging town. So, I mean, you're literally out in the middle of nowhere. It's beautiful, but you're not like in the heart of Publishingville and stock market exchanges and that sort of thing. It is now famous for the Twilight series because it's shot there and I guess takes place there. But can you take us from there to how you find yourself here and now as a published author of the world's first immersive book?
Yeah, so I grew up in a small town called Forks, Washington, which is now really famous because of the Twilight series, which ironically enough is written by a Phoenix suburb resident.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Is that right?
yeah. I believe.
Why did she pick Forks?
Well, the premise of that series is that it's vampires
Yeah.
and they needed, a really dark and gloomy space.
And a lot of rain.
And that's what Forks is. But it was actually a fantastic place to grow up. It's the nature is beautiful. It's right next to the beaches and the rainforests. But it is a little sleepy, small town. And so as a kid, I grew up reading J.R.R. Tolkien and Roald Dahl and all these different books that really allowed me to kind of, leave this sleepy little town and go, all over the world, the Count of Monte Cristo, and was able to kind of travel the world through this imagination. And so I really love fiction. I read a lot of business books as well as I've taken on responsibility in an executive role. But to be honest, I think there's just so much that you can learn from fiction about emotion and how to deal with challenges and overcome, Shakespeare. Just there's so much that I think is experienced through fiction that is the really the best way to teach people kind of the nuances of life.
And was this something you knew or felt growing up through high school and into college, or was it something that, in looking back retrospectively now, that you're like, you could really dig how fiction works in the logical executive business mind and has a place there in decision making and team building and brand development?
Yeah, so I went to University of Arizona on a NROTC scholarship. And
that's a Navy ROTC scholarship?
Navy ROTC scholarship. At the time, I actually hated it. You had to wear these, white uniforms. Everybody at Arizona's, out by the pool having a good time, and us ROTC kids are hutting, marching around. But looking back, it was a phenomenal experience because it taught me time management in just an incredible way. So if people are in the ROTC, they've got to get up early, they've got to have regimented schedules. And I actually have this schedule from my senior year, and it says schedule from hell. And literally like every hour of my day is blocked off. I was getting 5 hours of sleep a night. And at the time I was really wondering like, man, this is a lot. And to be honest, that's how I operate today. Very, very focused on morning routine. How do I get up? I get up at 4:30 every morning and write for a couple hours. Then I do a workout, and then I go into my day job. So I don't think I would have had that discipline that's really critical to be a writer if I hadn't had that experience at U of A.
And how did you go from dark and rainy Forks, Washington, to bright and sunny and brown Tucson, Arizona?
I have an identical twin brother, and an older brother and two sisters, and my two brothers went to University of Washington, and so I wanted to leave Washington. I was like the black sheep of the family. So I toured some California schools and University of Arizona, and I had the opportunity to hear Lute Olson speak once, and Lute was kind of telling us how he was getting heckled by his peers, that he left the Midwest, the heart of basketball, to come out to Arizona in the desert. And Lute said, "Well, I'm not recruiting kids to play in the desert. I'm recruiting them to play in paradise." And if you've been to University of Arizona, I mean, it is beautiful campus. And so, coming from Forks, Washington, seeing that, it was a great place to go to college. I met my wife there as well, so that's a bonus.
And then after school, you went into the Navy? Were you in the Marines for a while?
Yeah, so I was a Marine Corps officer and did 2 tours to Iraq during my time in the Marines. And then when I got out of the Marines, I went to business school here at Thunderbird, which was another really cool experience.
Thunderbird School of International Management. It probably wasn't ASU at that time. It was still their own separate school?
It was still their own separate school. And on the campus of Thunderbird, when you go in the gates, there's this quote from Socrates. It says, "I'm not a Greek or an Athenian, but a citizen of the world." And that really is the embodiment of the Thunderbird global mindset. And coming out of the Marines was a great experience, but the Marines is very homogeneous, a lot of white men, very male environment, which is a lot of fun to be a part of. It's kind of like a fraternity. But as I went to Thunderbird, I was exposed to this global mindset of, hey, I'm not a Greek or an Athenian, but I'm a citizen of the world. And it was a pretty stark transition from the Marine mindset. And what I realized is there's a ton of really talented people from all over the world that are looking to, build great companies and build great brands. And for me, that was really, really great to see, and something that I believe in. I want to spread that message. I also, being the father of now 3 daughters, am very much, looking at how are they seeing the world. We had an earnings call when the company was Taser. It was me, the CEO, and the CFO, and I had my then daughter, Kendall, was probably 6 or 7 at the time, sit in on the earnings call. And she said, at the end of the call, I said, "Do you have any questions?" And she said, "Why aren't there any women on this call?" And for me, that was a kind of a wake-up call to say, okay, hey, society was telling me you could be whatever you want. You could be a CEO, you could be an astronaut, you could be a doctor. But for my little girls, they're looking at where are the examples of people in leadership. And even in, stories like Harry Potter and others, Tom Swift, I thought, wouldn't it be cool if we could give them, example of a really strong, confident female protagonist that was solving really big problems with science and technology.
I mean, that's awesome. What an observation for a 6 or 7-year-old to make with everything else going on. And she says, hey, where are the women in this call? So then that's one of your inspirations behind iGist, which is IGIST, by the way, if you're out searching for it. So how long did it take you to write the book? And why don't you give our listeners kind of an overview of what is the story? What's the spine of the story in iGist?
Yeah, so the story of iGist is a really fun story. It takes place in the not-so-distant future. And the premise of iGist is that in the future, we'll have colonized the solar system and be out exploring the galaxy. And there's a space brain drain where everyone smart has kind of left Earth and gone up into the stars. And Earth is this dreary backwater place. And so our protagonist, Emmy, dreams of getting off Earth and attending the Intergalactic Institute of Science and Technology, iGist, which is like an MIT in space. And
it orbits the moon, right?
Yeah, it orbits the moon. And on Earth, there's actually this menacing plague that is indiscriminately, causing harm, and just it's kind of a reminder that nobody cares about the people on Earth. And so Emmy dreams of attending IGEST and using her talents to cure the plague. And so through some twists and turns, her and her friends are kind of end up being in a race against time to figure out how to cure it. There's some really fun characters. There's in the book, there's these Martians, and they're kind of know-it-alls. I'm sure you've never, worked or went to school with somebody like that. And then you have these really cool characters called Wardens, which are kind of the guardians of Aegis. They're half human, half yak. So it's very much a sci-fi, supposed to be a fun, entertaining book. We're not teaching the kids calculus in the book. It's a fiction story, but hopefully unlocks the spirit of the same thing that Tom Swift did. Hey, we're up against these existential challenges, but the right idea can solve any problem.
Yeah, I saw that as a theme. And is that something that is kind of a reflection of you and what you've learned over the years about doesn't matter what the problem is, the right idea can overcome?
I have actually, that was a common theme in the Tom Swift series. And when these scientists and inventors like Ray Kurzweil and Steve Wozniak refer to what inspired them about Tom Swift, it's just that simple premise that the right idea can solve any challenge. And we have a lot of challenges in today's times, and that's why I think you can look at this like, oh man, this is an awful time to be alive, or you can look at it like, hey, what an awesome opportunity to use all this science and technology that we have access to solve these really big problems around humanity's grand challenges.
I just had Jonathan Haidt on the show. I don't know if you know who that is. He's written 3 books, Happiness Hypothesis, The Righteous Mind, Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion, and his most recent one out, The Coddling of the American Mind. And he's one of America's foremost moral psychologists. And he will say, as you did, while a lot of people think we're living in the worst of times, in a lot of respects, it's some of the best of times. When you look at how the impact we have had on world hunger, race relations are actually better than they have been in some places in a long time. What's that book that came out, Factfulness, that just goes down this whole punch list of actually we're doing pretty well, despite what CNN and Fox News and everybody else might tell us. Oh, there goes my water. So in yours isn't really even that dystopian. I mean, it's that we're not living on Earth as much as we did in the, everyone's leaving for space. But I didn't read it as a dystopian view at all.
No, it's not. It's not dystopian. There's a lot of, it's actually a pretty popular genre in young adult is this dystopian fiction. That's not what IGEST is. IGEST is more of a Star Trek view of the world, which I think, if you talk with people about Star Trek, they really were pushing the boundaries on great storytelling, but also exploring these really interesting philosophical challenges of, how to deal with conflict. How do you deal with, pioneering and exploration in a way that respects the rights of others, all the meanwhile discovering what are the new frontiers. And so I think it's a very inspiring and uplifting view of humanity, and that's what I wanted to accomplish with the IGES story as well.
Who is your reader for this book?
So my reader, I wrote this book for my oldest daughter, Kendall, who is 10 years old going on 35. But it was a really fun experience in that I would get up every morning and write the story. And then I would actually probably once a week, I would have a chapter or 2 done. And so I'd read the chapters to Kendall as I finished it. And it was a really fun experience. And now I'm actually rereading the finished book to my 7-year-old daughter, Kaylee. And that's a super fun experience as well.
You did something interesting in this book that you've got 79 chapters, but they're often 1, 2, or 3 or 4 page chapters. Why did you decide to chunk it in such little bite-sized morsels that way?
So the idea is that you could read this as a hard copy of the book, but also on your app. The attention span of anybody these days is going down and down. And so just like eating, a little bag of popcorn, I thought, wouldn't it be cool if we could tell these like really kind of nifty chapter series where you could flip through it and not have to be sitting there for an hour or two at a time. And I think it creates a really fun, fast-paced experience. But when you go through it in the app as well, you've got these really fun Sputnik animations that come up along with some other cool features that I think make it a really fun and engaging experience.
It's like binge reading, but if you had 10 chapters of 40 pages per chapter, that doesn't feel like you're binge reading. But if you have 79 chapters of 4 pages and you're blowing through them, and I'm looking at the app right now, you've got the next chapters blinking below it. It does give you a sense that you're kind of binge reading, and they happen so quickly. You do a nice job of each one has a little bit of a cliffhanger to keep you moving forward.
Yeah.
So how does she like the book?
My kids are big Aegis fans, and it's been fun to see them kind of tell their friends about it as well. The ideal target would be really anyone from age 10 up to 16, although I think you could. I remember reading both my daughters the Harry Potter series when they were a little younger as well. So I think this is a great book for fathers or mothers to read younger kids, or kind of hand to older middle school age kids to early high school to plow through it. We've actually been out visiting a bunch of cities. We went down to Tucson, which was really fun. We also went to Flagstaff. We were in Salt Lake City, and we're going to San Diego this weekend. And as we're touring around, we're actually getting a really good response from high school kids and even college kids that are just, kind of attracted to the sci-fi, the beautiful illustrations, and just the really novel concept of this immersive novel.
And you've got a big launch here in Phoenix at the Phoenix Science Center on April 20th.
Yeah, we're doing an event at the Arizona Science Center, April 20th, and we have one of the characters, Balin, the Yak Man character. We actually have a studio Hollywood level costume of him, and so he comes. The kids love it. It's a really fun and engaging experience. So we're going to be visiting 26 cities in 2019 to promote the book. We'll be in Arizona at the Arizona Science Center April 20th. Then we're going to be in New York May 4th. May 11th, we're going to be up in Seattle at the Seattle Science Center, which is really fun. That's where I went as a kid.
Oh,
and so,
yeah.
We'll be going to a bunch of other cities throughout the year, and we've actually, inside the app, we have a challenge where you can follow along, and if you decode where we're going, you have the chance to win some really cool prizes. And a little later, we're actually going to announce what the grand prize is, but you have to wait till we announce it to see that one.
How long did it take you to not only write the book, but come up with the whole idea of all of the interactivity and the immersiveness that happens in the app? How long did that whole process take?
So I had this idea back in as early as 2011. I was telling one of our board members at Axon is a gentleman named Hadi Partovi, who runs an organization called Code.org, which is it teaches kids computer science at a young age. It's a phenomenal organization. And so at an event, he was telling me about what he was just starting out with Code.org and how he wanted to inspire kids to learn computer science. And we were talking about how books and fiction inspire people as well. And so I'd kind of told him, wouldn't it be cool if we redid like a Tom Swift, but with a young lady? And I actually didn't really start writing it until probably 2013, 2014. And, I've got a pretty demanding day job. And so I really, in order to pull it off, had to just be very disciplined with that time in the morning. And then about a year ago, I had finished the first draft of the book, and I was thinking about how could we bring this to life in a really interesting way. And through that process, I had this kind of aha moment to think, well, what if we made this into an app? My older brother is a software development manager up at Amazon. And so he's been kind of a great, thought partner with me. We also have a fantastic team of engineers at Axon as well. And so that's been kind of fun to spitball ideas with him. But the team that kind of built iGest is completely separate from Axon. And so, I run Axon, that's my day job. And then one night a week, I'll have this group of kind of iGest developers and designers over to my house, and a former Axon product manager, a guy named Alex Mercero, who's a Harvard grad. He was actually my intern at Axon. He had since moved on, and he contacted me and said, "Hey, I was thinking about going back to business school." I said, "You don't want to do that. Why don't you come run iGest for me?" So he runs all the product management and development teams for us, and I just get to do the fun stuff like write and go on podcasts. And
Well, story has been a big part of your career then too, because before we started recording, you had asked, do I have Robert McKee's book Story, and had I been to the Story conference? And I indeed have the legendary 4-day conference in the cold, dark Sheraton ballroom at LAX. You went to that yourself, and was that when you were a product manager at Taser? But you went to it, and then you actually had your other employees go there.
Yeah, so I first went when I got out of the Marine Corps. I took about 6 months off just to kind of figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And during that time, I actually wrote a novel called Senator's Son, which is a historical fiction novel based on my 2 tours to Iraq. And during that process, I met a lot of really cool authors and creative storytellers, and everyone kept recommending this course by Robert McKee. So I went out to LA and went to this course. It's actually for screenwriters.
Yeah, it's a screenwriting course.
But it's very, very good, and just the kind of building blocks of story and form, 3-act structure.
So when you went more as an author, not so much thinking about the brand, but something must have happened there to have you actually send some of your employees back to go through it themselves.
That's right. So fast forward, 6 or 7 years, and now I'm an executive at Axon, and our marketing at Axon, we really service the public safety market. And I've always loved Nike's marketing. When you put on a pair of Nikes, you're not, thinking I'm wearing a pair of, $20 tennis shoes. You're like, man, I could be Michael Jordan. I could aspire to be a great athlete. And so I think Nike does a good job of evoking this emotion of what you could be, what you could aspire to be. And that's the same thing that we want to do at Axon, is really empower heroes and law enforcement and say, how can we, create these kind of shift from warrior to guardian, where we're servicing communities in a really engaging way. And so I thought this would be awesome to send some of our marketers to this course. And I actually went out with them, and me and probably 3 or 4 different individuals from Axon's team sat through this story course, and they were raving about it. They loved it and brought it back. And we actually use some of those techniques in our marketing at Axon today as well.
Yeah, it is a very powerful course. I got a chance to meet Robert McKee there. Ended up going to his home in Connecticut and recording my very first ever podcast with this little unit, this little Zoom unit here. I had no idea what I was doing. It was before the business of story by a few years. I ended up carving up about 10-minute episodes with Robert, put it up on SoundCloud, and hope for the best. But since doing this program, I've had him on twice, and he's just such a character. I mean, he's like a legend. He's a Hollywood icon when it comes to screenwriting and story doctoring and so forth.
Yeah, he's incredible. Did they do the Casablanca?
Oh yeah,
yeah.
I've got my script right over there. What he's talking about, folks, is the last day as he sits down. McKee does, and there's rooms full of like 200 people, and 190 of them are wannabe screenwriters, of which he says 1% of them will actually be in my course, and maybe 10% of them were people in marketing. And we sat there, and they hand out the script to Casablanca. You get it in the big spiral bound thing, and then he sits down, and for about 6 hours he picks it apart. He goes through it piece by piece by piece and shows you what they're doing, what the writer was thinking, how it was directed, the subtext that was happening in it. To me, it was like absolutely fascinating. Talking about finding my flow, that time went by like that.
Yeah, so that story by Robert McKee has been just a foundational piece of how I think about telling stories. A couple other books that I would strongly recommend as well would be Stephen King has this book that he's written called On Writing, and it's just incredible to kind of go behind the scenes with him about how he thinks about telling stories. He's a phenomenal author and storyteller. Misery is probably one of the best books ever written. Another great book that I would recommend is called The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. And he's written a great book called Gates of Fire, which is about the Battle of Thermopylae. And that's just an amazing fiction story. But The War of Art is really kind of a collection of his thoughts around what is the creative artist's way of fighting the resistance. And it's just got these great kind of sound bites that are really inspiring. Another great book that I would recommend.
By the way, real quick on that one, by resistance, he means our procrastination, our fear of what in the world are we doing. You overcame that, fighting that resistance with your military background of getting up at 4:30 every morning and making sure you wrote for 2 hours.
Yeah. I mean, that would be my one piece of advice for people is just do it. You've got to get up and you've got to put in the work. When we were in Salt Lake City, we did the event at the Leonardo, which is just a really awesome science museum right in the center of Salt Lake City. And the founder of Atari went to University of Utah, I think, studied electrical engineering, and then founded Atari. And there was a quote from him, and it said something to the effect of, entrepreneurs aren't dreamers, they're doers. To create something, you've got to do the work. And that's something that I think comes through in Stephen Pressfield's The War of Art is overcoming that resistance and actually doing the work. Another really good book that I would recommend is there's a book by Sean Coyne called Story Grid, and he was a editor at some of the big publishing firms, and he kind of lays out from an editor's perspective at a major publishing firm, here's how you can structure a really compelling story. And he does this anatomy of The Silence of the Lambs, which is another phenomenal book if you've read it. And it's really cool to see how he deconstructs a book using this tool called the Story Grid, which for people that are interested in writing, this is applicable not only to telling fiction stories, but hey, how do you market your business? How do you sell a vision to get people inspired to go behind you? When I think about business and having read lots of business books, I think the most impactful stories in business are about people trying to accomplish great things, where they say, let's rally around a mission or a vision, this kind of new state of a future future that we believe in. And, I think that storytelling is a key part of that.
Oh, without a doubt. And one, as you were talking about those books, I was looking over my shoulder. Have you read The Writer's Journey?
I believe so. Yeah, that's the hero's journey, right?
Yeah, it's Christopher Vogler, who really was one of the first to identify the hero's journey in Hollywood. He was, I believe, at Pixar at the time. No, he was at Disney at the time before Pixar, and said, hey, folks, there is actually this template that exists out there. Wrote a now very famous memo that got handed around Hollywood, and then has since wrote a third or fourth. There's a third edition of The Writer's Journey, Mythic Structure for Writers. And I found this unbelievably fascinating. It had been on my list to read for several years, and I finally picked it up and I read it twice in the last 3 months. So to me, I just got so much out of that from just story structure, especially around brand and brand story development, that sort of thing. Oh, it's interesting. In the writing of iGist, did it or has it changed the way you've thought about your brand, the work you do at Axon? Has it had an impact and the reason why I ask that is you were so immersed in writing a book. I know I'm just trying to finish up mine, and mine is all about the story cycle system, that people can use in branding. That it does. It takes it out of you. You write, you rewrite. And I got to believe that somehow it rewires our brains a little bit, even when we're talking about our own brands, whether I'm talking about Business's Story or you and Axon. Have you seen a difference maybe in how you go to market or think about your audiences now as a fiction writer, author?
Yeah, I would say Axon and Taser have very much influenced the way that I think about the world and how we should approach solving problems. And our view at Axon is we want to create a better vision of the future. And so what exists today is just not good enough. And so at Axon, we wake up every single day saying, how do we use technology to make communities safer? And we're literally building new products and solutions that have a massive impact on society. And so as I think about telling a story with fiction, I want to create, really strong, smart characters that are focused on how do we build a better version of the future. And when I think about business, I think, the best businesses are the people that are challenging status quo. They're disruptors, there's innovators. I see you've got Phil Knight's book, Shoe Dog. What an incredible story
Fantastic.
About Phil Knight, building Nike, kind of, selling tennis shoes out of the back of his car.
And basically going out of business every month for about 10 years before they finally turn the corner. I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great story. And I think that the reason that Nike was successful is Phil really put the athletes as the protagonists in these stories where other people wanted to aspire to be like Bo Jackson and Michael Jordan.
Be like Mike.
Yeah, all the great people that he had sponsored those brands is just incredible.
Yeah. Well, story plays such a huge role. Is this your last book or is this just the beginning of a series in iGist?
So I've got a series mapped out for iGist. I'm actually writing the second book right now. So got up this morning, Monday morning, 4:30, got my cup of coffee, sat down. It's actually one of my favorite times of the day is just to be in my office, immersed in the world of iGist. So we've got 5 books planned. I think it's going to be a really fun project. And hopefully my goal would be in 15, 20 years, when the first person walks on Mars, during her press release, the lady says, I read iGist as a middle schooler and it inspired me to get into science and become an astronaut.
That's a fantastic vision. Where can people learn more about you and the book, and where can they download it?
So the iGist app is available on iOS, and it'll be coming out in Android just in a few weeks. We're actually going to launch that at the April 20th event. We'll be releasing our Android app.
And that's at the Arizona Science Center. So do you have a time on that by chance, or can people go to a website and figure out if they want to go down?
Yeah, it's at 3 to 4. And if you go to our website, igist.com, you can go to events and sign up for any of the events that we're doing across the different cities. So again, we're going to be in New York, Seattle. We're going to be in Los Angeles. We're going to be in Philadelphia. We're going to be in a lot of major cities.
You got a European tour too coming up, don't you?
We do, yeah. We're going to be in Europe. We're going to be in London, Paris, Rome, Geneva, Edinburgh, and a bunch of U.S. cities as well. And as you follow us along, you can actually follow us in the app. And we're going to release, in each city that we go to, we're going to release a clue. And that clue you can decipher to spell out kind of a hangman's board. And that spells out the name of the second book.
Oh, that's fantastic. So much fun. That's why it's the world's first immersive book. By the way, when you're in London, if she's around, I really hope you get a chance, or she comes out to your opening, Dr. Gina Halabi, who I had here on the show just a few weeks ago, and we were talking about this earlier. Just an amazing mind, an astrophysicist working at Cambridge University, and she is all about helping girls seek and find and have the courage to follow their interest in science as a career. She has a website called She Speaks Story, or Science Speaks Story. Now, I got to remember what that is. It's in my show notes, but she is amazing. She will love to hear about your book. And if you guys get a chance to meet, I know you two have a lot in common because she's doing what you're doing from the space science standpoint.
That's great. I'll have to look her up.
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. I know how busy you've got to be running Axon and now promoting your book. It's just awesome to have you here on the Business of Story and sharing your wisdom with our listeners.
Well, thanks, Park. I really appreciate it, and would really, if you've got young daughters or sons, I would encourage you, get this copy of I think they're going to love it. It's a fun story. It's a really immersive way to experience it through the app, and I really hope you guys enjoy it.
Now, the story's a blast. I'm about halfway through it and jumping over to the app. I thought, I don't really know if I would read a book on the app, but I found myself just like spending an hour going through the app. It's really easy to read and so much fun. So thanks for bringing this to the world. And folks, by the way, if you like what you hear on today's show and you've got friends and family members and kids in general that have an interest in science, make sure you send them a link to iGist. You won't be sorry about that because it is a brilliantly produced and well-written book, and it's so much fun to read. It'll get their imagination stoked, and that's what we need is more kids following up on STEM in school. And who knows, you might just put that first person on Mars through the inspiration of iGist. Awesome. And of course, if I can help you in your storytelling, in your brand story strategy development, please visit me over at Business of Story, where I've got tools, tips, techniques, and talent like L.S. Larson right here to help you craft and tell compelling stories that sell. And please join us next week when we will have another story artist from around the world right here on Business of Story. In fact, it's Dr. George Basil. So again, this whole idea about science and storytelling seems to be playing a theme here. The universe has set these folks up for me over the last 6 weeks. And next week, we are going to be talking about the energy, the thermodynamics of story. It's a metaphor that I've just had so much fun playing with. And Dr. George Basil, a fellow professor of mine at Arizona State University, comes in to share his approach on the energy of story. So I hope you'll be here for that. And until then, remember that the most potent story you'll ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make it a great one. Thanks for listening.